Right then, ladies and gentlemen, we will get kicked off. Welcome to this, the final event of the Technology Policy Unit's events. And I wonder if this might be a conference first, a debate about the policy opportunities of driverless and technology-assisted vehicles. I'm keen to learn a lot more about this particular debate, and I'm delighted that I'm joined by an expert panel on this very subject. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Eddie Copeland. I'm the head of the Technology Policy Unit at Policy Exchange. We look at a lot of different areas of how technology impacts policy, and this is a really fascinating one in terms of technology impacting on an area that all of us, everyone across the country, will be affected by, whether it's very successful in the short term or potentially some of those risks that need to be addressed and overcome as well. So, to our panel this morning, I'm delighted to have to my immediate right Steve Yarney, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Transport Systems Catapult. At the end here, we have Brian Matthews, the Head of Transport Innovation at Milton Keynes Council. And just to my left, we have Vanette Taylor, who is Head of M2M and IoT at Telefonica UK. I'm afraid that today's sponsor, I'm very grateful to Nissan for making today's session possible. Unfortunately, due to a last-minute, very important matter that's arisen, not able to join us this morning. However, each of our panelists will then have a little bit more time to outline their particular views on this topic. I'll be asking them some questions as well, and we hope that you will have some as well. On that note, then, just to give a little bit of context, I think we're all aware of how driverless and technology-assisted vehicles have risen up in terms of prominence on the political agenda, on the technology agenda. In part, it's because we see companies like Google and Apple clearly doing bold things over in California. But also, we know the automotive sector, Nissan included, are increasingly putting attention into what the future of driving looks like. How do we assist the driver? Do we need the driver? And what does that look like? The UK is known for wanting, this particular government is very keen on technology. We've got the Smart City agenda, we've got various catapults looking to enhance technology. And so we'll be discussing today what's the opportunity for the UK specifically to really lead on driverless and technology-assisted vehicles. And I think we should also get round to discussing some of those common risks, those concerns about a driverless future, which commonly come up. How do we address them? How do we make sure that we get the best of all worlds? Enough from me. I will we'll hand over straight away to Steve to give us the context from his role at the Transport Systems Catapult.
Okay.
Steve.
Thank you, Eddie. Good afternoon, everyone. It's just afternoon. So I wanted to provide some context around the project work that we have ongoing on driverless cars. So if you just bear with me, I would like to explain what we're doing as a catapult, because it's a number of things, including driverless cars. But our term that we use is intelligent mobility. So this is really why the Transport Systems Catapult was formed 2 years ago. We see the emergence of a huge global market for intelligent mobility. And this is where mobility becomes a service. So this is not about manufacturing cars, aeroplanes, trains. This is the service provision for mobility. So that market size we estimate within 10 years globally to be worth around £900 billion per annum. It is enormous. And our role as the catapult is to make sure that the UK captures a large slice of that market in intelligent mobility by doing what we and other catapults do. So we connect universities with industry. So we play in this middle range technology maturity level to help to commercialise on the success of the great ideas and the innovation that comes out of the UK's fantastic academic base. And we have an agenda as well to create wealth and jobs and prosperity for the UK as well. So that there is a government agenda to the Catapult programme. So we play a part in that. So it's a role for accelerating technology and bringing it into the market quicker. That's what we're trying to do as a catapult. So in the transport arena, what we see happening is a big shift from traditional, fairly siloed transport sectors doing transport to people. So there's a rail timetable, you use it. And increasingly what we see is that consumers are saying, no, we want more of a personalised service that is relevant to me, and I have information available to me in my smart devices. So I will start to demand personalised mobility solutions, and that again fits in with the term for intelligent mobility. And with that, we also see trends in terms of ownership models changing. So we see other trends of people living more and more in cities. So the UN forecasts are that currently about 50% of the world's population live in cities, about 3.5 billion people. As the world population increases and the migration to cities increases, that number is probably going to double by 2050. So that creates huge pressure on cities, and that again leads to new ownership models and new solutions for transport and mobility. And as part of that, we see the merging of private and public transport coming together. So if we think about how most of us get around today, it's mostly by car. The car dominates our journeys. But the car is a very underutilised asset. So in terms of efficient use of resources, the car is on average used by, utilisation rate is 4%. Most of its time it's parked up, waiting for us to use it for the next time, at our convenience. So lots of trends supporting this view for intelligent mobility and the huge market. And we're very pleased that the government sees this as well. So Eddie made that point earlier on. And I think the government recognised there is a global race going on for the deployment of this technology. And the Chancellor's announcement for £100 million investment from government matched by industry, so £200 million over 5 years at the budget in March, very welcome. And the first competition, the first £20 million tranche, just closed at the end of September. So we work very closely with industry bodies. So Automotive Council are a very keen player in this field. And the government have also set up a centre for connected and autonomous vehicles, which we welcome. And we have helped in a small way in terms of its formation. And we've also established another cross-industry group, recognising that intelligent mobility isn't just about cars, it's about all transport sectors and other sectors as well, like telecoms, like infrastructure, and like the ICT sector. So we have formed a group which we call IMPACT, excuse the acronym, but it's Intelligent Mobility Planning and Action Coordination Team for the UK. It's sort of pretty much what we're intending to do. But what we're trying to achieve is bring in all of these sectors and agree what the agenda should be for the UK to spot global trends, again, with the purpose of trying to help the UK to capitalise on this new emerging market. So I want to share with you a survey that we conducted very recently. We have started the dissemination. The full dissemination will take place next week. We call it the Traveller Needs Survey. We think it is the most comprehensive survey of intelligent mobility needs from a consumer's perspective ever undertaken anywhere in the world. It's about UK consumers. It's tapped into 10,000 travellers in the UK, and it's starting to reveal for us some very valuable and rich information. And we've done it as a collaborative project with a number of players, the Automotive Council, a cluster of motor manufacturers and other players in the market. And what do we learn from it? So I'll just give you a few tasters of things that we are learning. We're learning that out of these 10,000 users, the majority of us are connected. So 72% of people travelling in the UK have a smartphone. They are connected. What we also see is that there are fairly progressive attitudes in the UK. Again, from this statistical sample that we have taken, 32% are saying that they would share their possessions with others. So that leads to car sharing, or again, the merging of public and private transport that I mentioned earlier on. And 57% of people are saying that they would be happy to share their personal data if it helps them in their journey experience. So there are all sorts of debates going on at the moment about who owns data, whose data is it, Big Brother issues. 57% of people in this country are saying, if it helps me get around, you can have all my personal data. Quite revealing. And then it also highlights opportunities for intelligent mobility and for that to be exploited in the UK. So 57%, again, by coincidence, same number, are always looking for ways to optimise their journey. So most journeys are multimodal. 57% of people are looking for ways to improve it. And 75% of people are saying at the moment, as they undertake their journey, there's some kind of pain point, some kind of stress point, some kind of problem in their journeys, usually at the nodal interchange. But that again presents a huge opportunity in terms of helping people to get round, because 3/4 of people are saying there's a problem. And a statistic that's come out, which is in the context of this discussion, in terms of, are we nearly there yet? 39% of people are saying that they would use a driverless car. So in terms of the technology readiness right now, it's not quite there. I mean, it's been progressively deployed, but 39% we thought was a very high number. We expected a much lower number. So the driverless cars projects that we're involved in, so the Lutz Pathfinder pod launch in Milton Keynes, which we launched earlier this year. We've also exposed it to members of the public in Milton Keynes in recent months, has really helped to highlight the hunger from a public's perspective for this technology. We have been overwhelmed by the response that we got. The initial stages is building of 3 prototypes and running them around, testing them in an open environment in the Milton Keynes area, and we're partnering with Milton Keynes Council. It's also a great project to demonstrate what we as a Catapult are here to do, so connecting Oxford University and their mobile robotics group, the control system, with industry and the Automotive Council. And we're also involved in a larger scale project, so the next stage is larger scale deployment in UK Autodrive, which is Milton Keynes Coventry. Not 3 units, but 40 units starting to scale up.
That's very much.
Introduction. Thank you.
So it's nice to finish on the comment of Milton Keynes. So Brian, tell us about what Milton Keynes has been doing in this space.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity for this, and perhaps I can build on some of the things Steve has mentioned as a real use case scenario in the city of Milton Keynes. But if I perhaps start by putting Milton Keynes in context, those who might not be as familiar as myself with the city, it's probably the most successful new town in the UK. It's been going for around 50 years. We're at a population now of 250,000 within the city environment, but that will grow to 350,000 within the next 15 to 20 years. And again, context for that will place us the largest urban area outside London in the southeast. So it's that place you go past on the motorway, it's getting bigger. It's a huge economic base, it's a very lot of high-tech, highly skilled workforce with a £9 billion economy, and reported in the Centre for City Studies and others as one of the leading UK cities to help the recovery out of the economic blip we've just gone through. But it is the city of the car, where many will recognise that. It doesn't necessarily have higher car ownership than other areas, but it's designed specifically for ease of movement using the vehicle. Ownership is lower, but usage is higher. But with that growth and that prevalence of the car, we've got some challenges ahead. The growth I've talked about will deliver around 60% more travel demand. And looking at it as a town and transport planner in my previous life, we can only really practically provide another 25% of capacity in the traditional way. To do any more, we're talking of a bill of £1.9 billion to deliver the same level of infrastructure we've got at the moment. So we need to start thinking about how we progress and develop as a city. And one of the areas, not the only areas we've been looking at, is to look into the autonomous world to see how that can support and help deliver the growth and development of the city, and in line with aspirations of government and nationally, to see how that can be transferred into not only bigger cities but smaller places, to see how this can be adapted elsewhere. So we're talking a little bit more detail of the project specifically ongoing in Milton Keynes, and Steve mentioned the Lutz Pathfinder. That's Lutz, by the way, stands for Low Carbon Urban Transport Zone, and that's what we're trying to create within Milton Keynes and other areas. Without repeating the three pods, they're up and running, but one of the things that we work closely on is giving them authority to drive on our pavements, because these vehicles are not on the road, they drive on the pavements. And again, it's one of the challenges that I think the country and others will have to face. Perhaps Milton Keynes has been fortunate, because the way we've done it in Milton Keynes is recognise that the pavements in Milton Keynes are adjacent to a road, a carriageway, and the legislation allows you to turn that pavement into a road. So that's what we've done in Milton Keynes, and then banned every other vehicle off them apart from pods and people. So there's ways around how you deliver these things, and thinking differently is perhaps part of the solutions and challenges we need to look at. Steve also mentioned the UK Auto Drive. This is one of 3 initiatives led by governments and Innovate UK to promote the development of autonomous vehicles, driverless cars in the UK. And I would say of this, of course, but we believe the Milton Keynes project is the largest and most comprehensive of the 3. We're working with 3 manufacturers: Jaguar Land Rover, Ford, Tata, Nissan, who are not here today, are a partner within that, but not one of the providers of the vehicles, working alongside Coventry, legal bodies, insurers, academic institutes, Cambridge, Oxford, the Open University based in Milton Keynes, and of course the Transport System Catapult are also within the consortium. So that programme is to run for 3 years, and the 3 facets to it. The first is to put a real car on the real road, so to have a car running around in Milton Keynes and Coventry, Milton Keynes providing an urban laboratory. The cars and the technology is available now and quite happily run around on proving tracks and test tracks, but the next step is to put it in a real world environment, and Milton Keynes and Coventry, along with Bristol and Greenwich, are providing that facility. The second aspect to it is the autonomous pods, where we will take in the 3 pod, which is a demonstration of the technology, to try and resource them to provide a public transport system for Milton Keynes. So we've identified a network within the city that runs on the pavements, as I mentioned, to have 30, 40 of these, and looking at the business case and how they would develop into an intra-urban public transport solution that gives a true door-to-door service. And the third element is what we call the Cities Research Project, where we're looking again at the scalability of the business case, and importantly, the public acceptability of this as a new technology. How do we map what people think about it now, and how attitudes may or may not change, and respond to that? And why we're doing it in Milton Keynes? Well, safety is a big issue. 90% of accidents on the roads today are caused by human error. If you can take that out of the equation by having more autonomy and the machines actually preventing accidents, then we can make the next step change down in reducing accidents in the UK. We've got an enviable record across the world, one of the leading countries in reducing accidents, but to get down we need to look a little bit harder and a little bit differently on how we would address the accident issue. We need to start thinking about providing greater accessibility for our older and younger people. Trends now are showing that younger people are not passing their driving tests as young as they used to, but we need to support the mobility of the younger generation. And we always talk about the older population growing within the UK. Again, increasing the opportunity for mobility for older and perhaps disabled people is something that we need to consider. And perhaps just to finish on is to think about the travel efficiencies that this could bring. We're looking into the capacity of our highways. If we can fit more vehicles on the space we currently have by having more autonomy, vehicles can drive closer together at a safe speed with stopping distances and managed by the machines, then we could squeeze more capacity out of the roads we've currently got, and we won't face the 1.9 billion bill I suggested earlier. So I'll stop there, but there's a lot more I can come back to.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, Vanette, I guess, in the context of Internet of Things, machine-to-machine communication, this is probably one of the coolest applications that actually would genuinely transformative effect. So how do you get involved in this area, and tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, so completely different to the gentleman on the other end of the table. Machine-to-machine has been around for a long time. Telefonica have been in the market of machine-to-machine for well over 15 years now. We've seen a lot of trends moving towards the Internet of Things, and the two are different. They're very closely linked, but they are very different. So machine-to-machine tends to be around silo applications. And if we look at, we're here today to talk about connected cars and driverless cars. One of the first true applications that came out of machine-to-machine was telematics, where we're actually tracking driver behaviour. Was a driver actually driving too fast? Were they braking too harsh? Were they cornering too harsh? What were they actually doing? And it was a black box that was retrofitted into a vehicle to track the driver behaviour. We're now seeing that actually that same technology is being built into vehicles via the vehicle manufacturers. So we're seeing a lot of the new vehicles with that capability built in. Where that actually moves on to the Internet of Things, it's about how you actually use that data then. It's about, you know, if an accident takes place, what do you do with that data? How does the insurance company use that data? So you take all that together and then you actually say, where's the roadmap going here? What's actually happening? Well, the roadmap takes us then onto driverless vehicles. If I was to ask each and every one of you how you actually got here today, you'd all tell me a different story. You know, some of you will have got here by car, by train, some may have actually flown in. Actually, if I would then ask you the same question in a different way, how did you get here today and what role did you play in that? You know, were you actually the driver? You know, was there a driver on the train or was it a driverless train? You know, did the plane, was it parts of it that was actually flown by the pilot or not? Actually, that takes you from something that's driverless to semi-driverless. You know, whatever it is, it's a mode, and each of you would actually answer it differently. So why Telefonica? Why are we doing this? Well, actually, it all needs to be connected. And most of us walk around with a smartphone, an iPad, but we'll have some form of connectivity. What is key is actually standardization on that connectivity and also on the vehicles. So as we know, when we connect, whether it's a mobile phone to a car or whether it's something else and we're using Bluetooth, each OEM will actually have a different standard to what they use on that technology. So we actually need standardization. We also need to make sure that it's actually safe, that journey. So actually, the journey that we're going on, we're going to be safe in it, whether it's actually a driverless vehicle, a semi-autonomous vehicle, and I'll touch on that. You know, again, I was on the train this morning, two ladies behind me said, "Oh, you're going to the Conservative?" I said, "I am." They said, "Oh, we heard you talking." And there's driverless cars. "Oh, I'm not quite sure about that." And I said, "Well, do you drive?" "Yes." "Do you use cruise control?" "Yes." Isn't that semi-autonomous? Isn't that taking us part way on that roadmap to driverless cars? "Do you use assisted braking?" "Yes." And then the lady turned around, "I've got a nice, neat little button that if I press it, my car actually parks itself." Again, it's taken us on that road to driverless cars. And it's something that we and policy need to educate. You know, we need to make sure that we're engaging with civilians and letting you know what's actually happening with driverless vehicles. So one of the key things that we've been doing is actually working with consortiums as well, because we know that, you know, this isn't, as Steve touched on earlier, about one player. You know, one company, one organisation cannot do this and cannot do it on their own. It's about actually collaboration, whether it's with city planners, you know, whether it's with OEMs, whether it's with telcos. It's actually about collaboration and bringing the best of breed together to actually work through this and actually, you know, sorry to use the pun, but go on a journey together and actually deliver through. The key thing as well from a technology standpoint is data. Who owns the data? What do you do with that data? How do people feel about how you use that data? So lots of questions, again, that I've not really given you the answer for, but it's what we as individuals, we're all going to be users of driverless vehicles in one form or another, whether that's a pod, whether it's a shuttle, whether it's a car, you know, each of us will actually interact in different ways with it. The one thing that I would say from building all the way through to OEMs is security as well. You know, we need to look at security from the grounding up, not from let's deliver this and then let's have a look at security. And we all also need to share our learnings with, you know, different consortiums. So again, I'm part of the Gateway project out of Greenwich. With Milton Keynes, it's research. We know we need to take that, we need to share it, and we need to have common standards that, you know, come through. And we also need to comply with international standards and what's happening in the rest of the world and have a look at that. So connectivity is key because at any level of whether you're looking at the security, the safety, the delivery, you know, it's connected in one form or another, and we believe that, you know, there needs to be some policy guidance on some of that too.
Thank you very much. So, some great introductions, raising a whole load of different areas. But if I can maybe start by directing a question to you, Steve, and to say, you've mentioned some of the natural reasons that the UK might be good at this, our willingness to share data, the fact that there's high smartphone penetration. We're used to using technology, but why specifically, of all the different technologies out there, is the UK going to be good at tech-assisted and driverless cars? And who's the competition? You know, we hear about the dominance of Silicon Valley on so many areas of technology. What gives us confidence that we can be a world leader on this stuff?
Okay. So where is the competition? The competition is in the States and Germany, and other nations are coming on board as well, Singapore, Japan. I mentioned a global race. There is a global race. Everyone's looking to develop this technology. You know, why is the UK going to succeed in this space? I think yeah, there's two ways of looking at this. This technology is being developed, so we could sit back and wait for it to be developed by others and then just be users. I'm much more bullish and feel that we need to be at the heart of it. We need to be driving this technology so that we gain a bigger slice of those commercial opportunities at the end of it. But we have the right ingredients in terms of a world-leading academic base and a very vibrant automotive sector. So whilst OEMs, there aren't many OEMs that have their home here now. Most OEMs are global players, but a lot of them have presence here, and a lot of them do their R&D here. So we have a great opportunity to develop the knowledge and the research in this field. The government support is very helpful. And I mentioned 100 million. I mean, the fact that we exist as a catapult with public funding is part of the mix of the government saying, come and develop this technology in the UK. We will help that process because we want jobs to stick here and wealth and prosperity to stick here. So I think those would be my immediate answers. I think the other aspect to look at is that I introduced the topic of intelligent mobility, which is very broad and very big. And we do need to start thinking in the UK about, you know, where actually are we going to be global leaders in certain aspects of intelligent mobility. And some of the areas have been mentioned by other speakers. So standards, I think. There are no world standards in this area. I think we have an opportunity to move forward on that. I think we have some very strong sectors that are going to play a leading role in intelligent mobility in the future, like insurance, like telecoms. We're world leaders in those fields, so let's exploit that. And I think another area to look at is the control system. So I mentioned the work that we're doing on the driverless pods with the University of Oxford and their mobile robotics group. It's quite clear to me that in terms of the control system technology, which is going to be the brains of the system, we are leading the world. And we should not be ashamed of that. We should embrace it and exploit it and develop it, which is what we're trying to do. There's plenty there to go at.
Can I just come in on quick point on that? The other aspect to remember is that the UK government have issued, through the Department for Transport, have issued a code of practice for operating driverless vehicles on the UK's highways. When I've been working in Europe with partners to have a look at their systems, they look on us with enviable eyes that we've created the conditions in the UK to take the tests to real-life environments, hence why the tests are going on in Milton Keynes, Bristol and Gateway down in Greenwich, that we have created the conditions that gives us an advantage.
No, very much so. The regulatory environment here is very favourable.
That's really good to hear. So I understand this sort of economic opportunity, and that, you know, we could really be developing the technology, the businesses around that technology. Brian, if I can come to you on how this changes cities, and I know one of the key challenges that I've seen in things like the smart city agenda or many areas of technology is that it's quite difficult to engage people outside the tech community with how they need to do things to realise the opportunity. And I guess you highlighted things like the way this changes cities operate. You're talking about improving congestion. Also, you mentioned older people and potentially people who feel isolated at the moment, the opportunity perhaps with social services to get people more mobile. How do we engage planners, road infrastructure developers, social services, all those other communities in this agenda to realise the best aspects?
I picked the last point up first. I think that is a huge challenge, and progress needs to be made. I've been involved in discussions with industry and other partners, and the worry they have is the engagement of local authorities and building up the common understanding and basis from taking this forward. So I think there's some work to do to engage with city planners, town planners, local politicians to ensure that they're thinking about this in the round, and this is part of the solutions that cities are looking for. If I go back a little bit in history and some painful experiences within the Milton Keynes context, and I'm sure it's in other urban areas, in the past I think we've been engaged in trying to change our cities to fit and adapt to transport. And that's come across some heavy challenge when people like the places they live. We don't want to change. We can see this. We like it. A gentleman here was talking about Tunbridge Wells. I'm sure that's got a wonderful city or town that you enjoy. Same in Milton Keynes. So it's part of the solution is to looking to adapt transport to fit into the urban environment that you want to create and flourish for your own local purposes. So it is about engaging and with town planners, transport planners, health professionals, the whole gambit, as it were, to ensure that this is developed for the particular needs of the local area, to deliver the benefits you want in the local area.
Thank you. And to Vanette, I think your comments on personal data. This morning we were in this room and we had a chat all about what do we want government to do with our personal data. And there's still this real conflict and nervousness and very difficult to judge public opinion. In the broad, they may be very sceptical about bolder uses of their personal data, but with specific examples, we know that they may be willing to share. How do we navigate that minefield that you've sort of mentioned of my car is recording more data? Does the insurer get to see it? Does government get to see it? Do road planners get to see it? Do I use it for myself? How do we have a sensible conversation about any of that?
I think, Steve, you've been doing some research on that one, haven't you? But, I mean, it's actually really interesting because the UK, you know, you mentioned how other countries can learn from the UK and what they want to do. Actually, when you actually look at the UK, one of the key things that people do is they actually respect our ethics and how we do actually use people's personal data and how we do share that. And I think, you know, government should always actually keep that at the back of the mind. And remember that we're all users, you know, I keep saying that, but actually, how do you as an individual want your data to be used? And we need to actually make sure that we actually voice our views on that. But actually, you know, Steve touched on earlier that, you know, different people don't mind you using data. So the younger generation, you know, if I've got a 15-year-old and if I speak to him, if he's getting something back from giving you his data, quite often he'll share that data with you. You know, we've then got the older generation where it's like, I'm not quite sure what are you going to do with that data and how you're going to use it, and more conservative over how you can use that data. But it is down to what's in it and how much of that data is information, and the two are different. So data is all about storing it and maybe doing some analytics on it. Actually, the information is what's actually going forward on it, and I think the two are different there.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that?
Please do.
So, I agree with what Vanette has just said, but when we talk to manufacturers who are based overseas, let's take Germany, they look to the UK with some envy, actually, in terms of how progressive our telecoms market is and how information is used in a fairly open environment. And as Vanette said, you know, we're quite good at having these open debates, and we need to promote that more as we move into this area, because data is going to be a big part of, I think there's too many connected devices going on here.
Yes.
I've tried to move my ones away. Data is going to form a bigger part of the intelligent mobility scene. And if we just take the car, a car has thousands of sensors on it. It's recording all sorts of information about its own function, but also the environment around it, because it goes over bumps, what the temperature is outside. All of that is useful information. If that car is internet connected, then it opens up the possibility of that information being used for other markets. And that alone, so what we see is that network operators will emerge who will swallow up that data and convert it into useful information and sell it on into other areas, subject to all of these debates on ethics. That market alone we see is growing to £100 billion per annum globally.
And to
So
follow
again,
on
it's
to
worth going for.
we've actually done some research that actually shows that in Scotland that travellers will actually travel from out of the city into a major city, get a train from that city and actually go to another city and down into London, because it's actually cheaper to park locally, but actually to get the train from that city down into London is more expensive than actually going on across to another major city. I'm trying desperately not to promote a particular train operator here, but actually, people will actually go for what's best for them. And in some cases, if it's about saving money and actually getting to a destination quicker, they'll do that. Because of the data that we were collecting, we were then able to go back and actually not just help the train operator to say, actually, because you're more expensive, you're actually losing out on the number of passengers travelling down, because they park in here, they drive in, they park in, they get in a train across, so doing a local train to then actually go into London to actually make it. And it is about using that data, and they were so happy to share that data with us once we could actually give them the benefits back. So, Steve's totally right there. People will share that data with you.
I mean, one important question I think we do need to cover, and again, perhaps if we can just start with Steve on this, and then I'm very keen to open up to the audience to get some of those other questions from you. There seem to be these two competing visions of the future of driverless cars. One is that literally driverless, and that's the Google, the Apple model. I'm very aware, though, you've got the phenomenal power of the automotive industry saying that actually people like driving. You've got your car magazines, you've got people enjoy the driving experience. Top Gear, I'm sure, would not have been as successful were that not the case, whatever you may think of that particular example. Will assisted driving and driverless eventually converge? Are there different applications for both? Where do you see them going?
You're right. There are two competing directions. I think it was described by Wolfgang Eppel from Jaguar Land Rover at the Low Carbon Vehicle event a few weeks ago quite well, I thought. And what he described was two parts of the brain, one rational part of the brain and one emotional part of the brain. The emotional part of the brain will tell us, we love driving, we like that feeling of control, and the car will have a place in our transport system forever, probably, for that reason. The rational side of our brain says we need to join up the transport system, make it more efficient, and have more effective use of resources, which is the driverless autonomous route. So I think both will coexist, but what I predict will happen is that, Brian mentioned the safety aspect. If you talk to the automotive industry about what is the primary driver for the progression of autonomous technology, they will say it's about safety. So in this country, 1,700 to 1,800 people per annum are killed on the roads every year. 90% of those accidents are in some way caused by human error. So by developing this technology, driverless technology, autonomous technology has the opportunity of taking away a large part of that risk. So ethically, we have to do it. It's the right thing to do. How do the two combine? I think in a transitional state, you could talk about segregated infrastructure, maybe. I think the market will actually drive it, because when at the moment, if you're a young person and you want to drive a car, the insurance premium is very, very high. So trend over the last 20 years is that young people are learning to drive at a declining rate. It continues to fall. Costs are very high. So if the insurance sector is presented with an opportunity of people have a mobility solution in a much more inherently safer system, or you can drive yourself, but that's inherently less safe, the insurance market might respond to that, and that might incentivise us to go one way or the other.
Thank you. I'm keen to open up. Let's just see, are there questions from the audience on any of this? Yes. We got a microphone at the back somewhere. And so if you do have a question, just name, organisation, brief comment or question, and we'll pose that to our panel.
David Scott, Councillor Tunbridge Wells. We prefer to call it self-driving vehicles rather than driverless, because I think that's a much more positive sound to it than, because they do drive themselves as opposed to being driverless. We've been trying to raise the profile amongst our local politicians and the public generally in the town, because we feel that congestion is probably our #1 problem. And we are a relatively small town, certainly compared to even to Milton Keynes or whatever, but we don't have a mass transport problem. We've got an individual transport problem where we just got too many cars and too few roads and too few places to build them, but we feel that we can actually come up with solutions. The question really is, how do smaller towns gain the benefit rather than waiting for the big cities or other places to actually start adopting some of the concepts and technology? And the key one of the key elements is also, how do we integrate it into our rural backgrounds where we have these small towns?
Let's start with Brian on that one. What advice could you give to smaller towns seeking to get a bit of what you can do?
I think it's really to articulate what I think you've articulated the problem in Tunbridge Wells, it's congestions, but how you want to see, what are your targets, what do you want to achieve, then look at transport systems that are best suited to achieve those goals. So if it's reducing congestion, the autonomous world may bring you opportunities to create corridors, roads specific for driverless cars that can platoon and move more people along that same level of road space. So it's articulating what you want to achieve, and then looking at the areas within your location to deliver that. And the technology that is being developed in Milton Keynes, Singapore, or else in the West, I think will be applicable to smaller areas. Then it's also thinking about in the future, and particularly the rural area, how we will start using cars in the future. As Steve says, cars will always be about, but I think the way we use them will change. I can't see a very expensive, very clever autonomous car being used for your commute into work, then park for 8 hours and commute home again. If it's got the ability to drive it somewhere else to do another purpose, then surely that's what you need to start thinking about use of that vehicle. So vehicle usage will be high, but car ownership low, and see how that can help develop your city. In Milton Keynes, we're particularly interested in looking at how connected vehicles can talk to the network so it can be managed, and that we can offer dynamic pricing, say on parking, if you come at a particular time. So giving the information to the driver and the vehicle so it can make right decisions that benefit the user and also benefit the urban environment.
Any other questions? Yes, lady at the back there.
Thank you. My name's Helen Ford. I work for General Motors UK. We're obviously developing and have done for a number of years autonomous vehicles, and one of our senior R&D executives announced at our shareholder conference a few weeks ago that by next year we'll be having a fully autonomous vehicle on the road. There's obviously been lots of global trials going on for decades. He's coming over to the UK in a few weeks' time, and I really want them to be able to do things, our company to do more R&D in the UK. And I'm interested in your views on policy, but also about whether the transport systems catapult has a role in also urban planning, and what needs to be done from an urban planning point of view to enable a market for these vehicles and how we can integrate them, because it seems to me that there's lots of different players in this field, and there needs a role for someone to bring these all together.
Great question, I think, for Steve.
Okay. Well, I'm delighted to hear that General Motors want to do more R&D here in the UK. So I very much support that. Yeah, right. Okay. So, can we play a role to help hook them in? Yes. What that may be, it can be a variety of things. So, I mean, yeah, we're not a funder. directly. So we receive public money to do the right thing in this space, with the big agenda of exploiting new ideas and technology in the UK for UK jobs to be created and wealth and prosperity in the UK. We do a lot of work with UKTI in terms of encouraging inward investment. So I think the answer is we need to have a debate in terms of what your colleagues would be looking for in terms of support and assistance, and how we might help to broker that to make that happen. So do we get involved in urban planning if it's the right thing to do for the deployment of a technology? Yes. So the example we have, the application of the pods, is something we're working very closely with the local authority in Milton Keynes. Brian has a specific interest for a connectivity issue in Milton Keynes. Our interest is developing the technology, and it just so happens it rides on the back of a useful application. So if there are other useful applications in urban environments, we're very happy to have a chat.
And if I could just reiterate the code of practice that the Department for Transport has issued, there's no barriers to General Motors coming to operate driverless vehicles in any UK city. It doesn't have to be Milton Keynes, Coventry, Bristol or Greenwich. The conditions are there to allow those tests and trials with suitable checks and balances in place that the guidance illustrates, but the door's open for this testing in the UK.
Good point from Brian there is about them all coming together, because the money that the government have given from the Innovate project is all about research. So it's actually about, what can be done with research. So all the three consortiums have actually said that they'd actually work with other players.
We sit on the consortium, well not on the consortium, but the steering committee for the Greenwich.
Yeah.
GM, GM as well. And we keep the US well informed as to what's happening, what's available. But as Helen said, there's no really good alternative to getting face-to-face with somebody to actually talk about it.
So I do believe that General Motors were over earlier on in the summer with Greenwich, and which is really good as well, because with Greenwich they've got the old and the new as well. So the old part of Greenwich, is going to be very difficult from a connectivity standpoint, and how that's integrated with the new, and how transport can go out, because you've got around the O2 and where you've got all the tubes going in and everything else, and Greenwich Meantime there, you've really got the old and new at that particular point, and there's lots of new building going on and everything else. So I do know that they came along to one of those meetings earlier on in the year. So was it? There you go.
Gentleman on the second row had a question.
Hi, I'm Morris Cousins from Westbourne Communications. We're a communications consultancy. The term disruption in technology is often overused. It's a bit of a cliche, but I think in this case, I think it's probably an appropriate word to use. And we've heard a lot from the panel in terms of how it will disrupt our economy and a number of the benefits it can sort of bring in. With any sort of disruptive economy technology, there is obviously a number of benefits, and you've spoken about sort of productivity gains and what that and all the other things. But obviously, with disruption, you also get probably some challenges. And we've heard you touched earlier on in terms of on data, and we are seeing from America. I think the FBI have sort of said that they are concerned about driverless vehicles being used as sort of drones and getting hacked by terrorists and all that sort of stuff. How concerned are the panel perhaps about the public perception and how the public might receive this technology? We have
Well, and that's I said we
in terms
wanted
of things like you've seen some technologies like fracking and GM where that's proved to be a barrier to its implementation. Sorry.
Well, yeah, do you want to start, Steve?
So if I have an opportunity firstly. So I think cybersecurity is a huge issue. I think Vinette said that we need to consider that right from the outset. So yes, there is a risk. So we need to design in mitigation against that risk as these systems are developed. I think the appetite, as I mentioned in my opening session, the appetite from the public for this technology to be progressed is quite incredible, much stronger than we anticipated. That leads to a great environment for an open debate, and we are encouraging that open debate. And I think through that open debate, these issues like cybersecurity, it can get hacked. Okay, fine, that is a risk. We need to develop solutions to protect against that risk. The way that we're developing the pods, I've spent most of my career, some time in automotive, other time in off-highway automotive and in the rail system, developing new product for market. Normally, all of that product development is done behind closed doors. What we're doing with the pods is we are testing and developing those products in the open. So a big part of what we're doing is public engagement. We went through a public engagement event a few weeks ago. Huge response, lots of smiling faces, questions, concerns, but we had that dialogue, we had that debate, and I think we need to encourage more of that.
And if I could just add flavour to that, I was asked to help put together the delegates for that public engagement. And my experience in Milton Keynes, I've come across some very challenging stakeholders, and they were all invited to that session, and they did embrace what was going on. Context again, I think when we've had the massive publicity around the pods, TV, everything around them, a great deal of interest. I've had 2 letters from concerned members of the public. That's some total, and they were both to do with safety issues.
So just taking that point and posing this to the net, isn't all that fine until we get the first headline that this has gone wrong? Because I assume, although yes, overall safety, that all the facts seem to state will be considerably better if we have assisted or fully driverless cars. But there's quite a utilitarian argument when you're trying to talk to one family who were the first to have a major accident when they were out of control. Kind of similarly to how some people, although planes may be largely autonomous, some people hate the lack of control that they personally have over their journey. Where do you see, how do we build that sort of trust and confidence?
So it's about engaging with the public, as been mentioned, and actually taking the public on that journey with you. So it's not about, there's certain things that's developed behind the doors from an engineering standpoint, but actually it's about working together, working in collaboration. So you touched on if an accident takes place, it's exactly the same as today. If an accident takes place and there's a black box in the car today, it's what you actually do with that data, how you use it. Who's at fault today? You've got a black box in a car, an accident takes place. Was it the vehicle with that black box in the car, or was it a vehicle without that black box? It's about taking that information, using it, and actually sharing that information. And again, Steve touched on it earlier, the insurance companies have a big part to play in this, and government and helping us do that. And we are actually seeing on each of the consortiums, they are actually engaging with different industry experts. And it isn't about, as we said, just the car manufacturers or the technology companies. We've been very, very careful to actually make sure that we've covered all those areas.
Can I add to that? So again, I agree. It's about public engagement and openness and transparency with what we're doing, being honest about things that go wrong. I mentioned the test and development program for the pods. There's no test and development program I've undertaken in my career where some things haven't gone wrong. You learn. That's why you test. To discover the issues. So some things are going to happen, and we're already thinking about how we deal with that and how we engage with the public. We're not going to hide anything. It'll be done openly. The issues around, driverless technology has the opportunity to take away a big part of the risk that currently we are exposed to as a society. Is the driverless autonomous system going to be foolproof? No. No system takes out risk entirely. There is always going to be an element of risk. So again, we need to have that debate. But how many debates are there at the moment about human error-induced fatalities? The Glasgow bin lorry fatalities, the runaway truck in Bath, the German wings aircraft thing. All of those were caused by human intervention or human mistake. They are much, much bigger than the potential prospect of developing this technology. And okay, there will be one day some driverless system that has some kind of problem, but it's a much lower risk than we're.
It sounds like it might be a battle between an emotional argument and a rational argument, which, as we know in many other contexts, are a challenge. But I just want to pick up on just one other potential challenge, which I think, sort of based on that last question, which I know has been raised. I know that Travis Kalanick, the Uber CEO, has publicly stated he wants all Uber cars to be driverless in the future. So in terms, and this question is really to Brian, one of the potential concerns is that, you know, if we're worried about digital disruption now, what happens when a lot of drivers, whether it be in freight or taxi, are no longer required? Does that then put us just back in favour of tech-assisted rather than fully driverless? Or as a city, how do you think about that kind of issue, if at all?
Sorry, I missed the point of the...
Also, do you worry that a downside is that this could cause significant unemployment if a lot of driving-related jobs are suddenly made unnecessary?
When that question's been posed before, I think of the Milton Keynes context where I see around 100 taxis sat outside the railway station, 90 minutes to 2 hours between fares, and often those fares are low fares. So that there is an opportunity that we create other industries alongside to sort of help a business that is not quite doing so well in many areas, certainly in the taxi driving side of things. It's about thinking about retraining drivers and creating other opportunities for higher skilled employment. So yes, there is that concern. I don't think I've got all the answers to that, but I think it's a natural development. This won't happen overnight. We suddenly won't get 100 taxi drivers out of work, because it will evolve over time, and there will be creative industries to run alongside it.
Thank you. Any other last questions? But I've got a chance for one more if there is. If not, what I will do is, drawing to a close, if I'll just be asking in a short moment for each of our panellists to give us a final thought on where do we go next. Again, this opportunity for the UK to be particularly good to hold this agenda, to be a world leader in it. What will it take? What would you be advising any of the policymakers we see here at Party Conference to be doing in the immediate future? If I just briefly summarise some of the key points that we heard from your earlier remarks. So, Steve, you were saying, you know, we've got a choice between being passive about driverless cars or really active, taking control of it. Let's be active. This concept of intelligent mobility potentially going to be worth 900 billion in 10 years. Huge, huge figure. I mean, that surely is something to be excited about. Moving to this expectation of personalised transport, that changing nature of ownership. And actually, the fact that the UK is well suited for this, our happiness with technology, our willingness to share in return for that more personalised transport opportunity. Brian, we've learnt about Milton Keynes being much larger and growing, perhaps as some of us may not have realised in the past. Significant challenges, though, on transport just within your city, I'm sure within many others in the UK, and driverless tech-assisted vehicles offering a solution there. That 90% statistics on improved safety with those tech-assisted driverless cars, I think, very, very significant. And I really loved your point. We've adapted cities to cater for transport in the past. Can we reverse that, make sure we've got transport that is adapted to cities? And then, Vanessa, I think your comments, I heard your call for standardisation on data. That sounds particularly important, an area that perhaps the UK can lead. These key questions, though, around who owns that data, how do people feel about it being used, and that call for security. But finishing on your note that people actually do respect the UK for data ethics, and again, another reason why the UK could be particularly good at this. So let's start in reverse order. What would be your sort of final thought, your call to policymakers here at conference?
Embrace change. You know, this is going to happen in one form or another. We're on a roadmap, we're actually on a journey, and we're going forward. It's at what level and in what time scale it's going to happen, and whether it impacts us today or our great-grandchildren, it's going to be there in one form. So let's embrace it, let's influence, and let's lead, you know, let's lead the country and actually show other countries that, you know, we're good at this stuff.
Thank you. Steve?
I mentioned the £100 million from the Chancellor to encourage development of intelligent mobility in the UK. That is very welcome. In the context of a £900 billion market, it could be much more. And I know we're in a period of austerity, but the market prize here is enormous, and I would encourage more investment. You know, money talks. It will bring in and be matched by industry. The opportunity is very great.
Thank you very much, Brian.
And for me, it's really defining more clearly what we want from this as a solution. What solutions, outcomes do we require from driverless, self-driving vehicles, and recognising that it won't be a straight path to there. But if it's about creating greater mobility, rather than just about selling more cars, not that I've got anything against selling more cars, but it's bringing that together. What is the outcome that both industry, local authorities, other stakeholders can get behind and work together to deliver? Because I sense they might be just slightly going in a slightly different direction, so it's about bringing everybody together to have a clearly defined outcome.
On that note, thank you very much indeed. Fascinating discussion. May I say a big thank you to Nissan for making this event possible. Very grateful to you. Really interesting debate. I've certainly learned a lot. I hope the audience has as well. Thank you to all of you for coming to join us today for this last technology policy event for Policy Exchange. Please, can you put your hands together to thank our panel of Vinette, Steve and Brian for their contribution today. Thank you.